Welcome back, everyone, to what I hope to be the last in a four-part series of the rust repair on my 1989 BMW 325i E30. This car, which I bought thinking it was just a mechanical issue type car, turned into what was actually a huge rust bucket. So in this video, we hopefully will rectify the remaining rust issues, which are now confined to the passenger side rear wheel well, particularly where the fuel tank vent line hose routes behind the shock absorber. All of those mounting points just completely rotted out because that vent line cover just traps mud and everything else from the road. The tire just slings it up and it gets caught behind that cover and it just sits there and rots it out. To recap, let's go take a look at this area. Okay, so navigating back here to the passenger rear wheel well, first glimpse of all the rust spots. Yeah, it just looks terrible, but I'm hoping that once I start grinding down around those rusted areas that we'll find some good metal we can start welding onto. Now, unfortunately, these are fuel vent lines. I believe they all serve some sort of fuel venting purpose, which makes it a somewhat dangerous area to do welding in because, of course, welding is melting pieces of metal together. So that certainly would be hot enough to ignite any sort of fuel vapor should it be present. I want to remove those lines in order to do the grinding and welding back here. To do that, I'll have to get to the top of the fuel tank and disconnect those lines. So let's go take a look at that. We'll see inside of the passenger compartment. I've removed the rear seats, and underneath this cover in here, there's just 4 Phillips head screws that hold this on. We'll see that here's our large vent line, and then we have 2 other smaller lines hidden under here. There's these factory hose clamps on there. I'll probably just have to cut them and reaffix them with just regular worm gear type clamps like someone's already been here and done. But anyway, so I've got 3 lines I got to disconnect from in here, and then I will be able to hopefully pull them out here and then hang them down so that they're no longer in the way. I'll also need to remove this rear shock so that I have full access to all of these areas. So those are the main spots I want to fix. We've got this here and there. And then the secondary issues back here are in the wheel well. If we look up here near that, I'm not even sure what that tank does. Obviously it has something to do with the fuel system. We've got a hole up there at the top of the wheel well. And then down here, the bottom of the wheel well, this is a bit hard to see. It leads into the trunk. I need to grind that back and basically put a patch panel there. So lots of small holes to deal with, 4 of those being fairly critical as they lead into the trunk. Let's go see what this looks like from the trunk side. Moving into the trunk, we can see, first of all, that small hole down there at the bottom. That is the back of the wheel well. And then if we go further in here, you can see there's 1 hole back there. Then 2 holes here in the shock tower mount. And then that last hole back there is actually where those vent lines cross over into the passenger compartment. So those are the issues before I've even started grinding anything away. So it appears I have saved the hardest for last. I know it's not going to be easy. Lots of thin metal to deal with along with fuel vapors. Kind of scary, but I'm going to be very careful, take a lot of precautions to make sure it is completely safe work environment. But daylight's burning and it's time to get down to it. Fun update time. I got the hoses out and that's where things went from bad to worse. Let's take a look. Okay, so I've got the 3 hoses out of the way and I don't think there's any way I can reuse this braided hose. I mean, just look at that. Like what? It looks terrible. But what's worse is that this metal tubing that comes from the passenger compartment, goes to the gas tank, and then comes out this wheel well is completely gone. I can stick my finger through there. This goes into the trunk right here. And the only way to get this hose out was to get a screwdriver in there and start rooting around, because the hose had actually been one with that, what was left of the pipe. The rust had just seeped through the hose, and you can kind of see how it's orange on the hose now. So basically with that screwdriver, I've completely ruined the rest of that pipe, what was left of it. Let's take a look at inside of the passenger compartment. We look inside of here, things just got very crumbly. See, here's the tube that all those hoses run through, goes in here, and then it goes into the gas tank. So I got all the hose connections undone here, and I plugged them up with various rubber stoppers. A little tip is, if you ever get like a power steering pump or a brake master cylinder new, and they plug up all the holes with these little rubber plugs, don't throw those away, because guess what? You can reuse them for things like this to reseal fuel lines while you have them disconnected. Otherwise, you're gonna get fuel vapors like crazy. So, you see, I plugged up 3 with those little plugs I've saved from previous projects. In fact, I've got a whole box of them right there. But anyway, back to the task at hand. So here is the metal tube, and yeah, you can see there's not much left of that. Just rust flakes everywhere. I'm gonna have to vacuum all this out. What I'm gonna have to do is cut this tube off and then rebuild it. I'm gonna have to reattach it to the wheel well right here, have it pass through this bulkhead, and then have it come out the wheel well right here. It's kind of a complex area, and I'm gonna have to custom make it, which is okay, because I've actually went out and bought a steel pipe. So we're gonna have to get creative with this. So obviously this job got a lot more involved than I was expecting, but then again, I guess I always have to expect the worst with this car, and sure enough, it's rearing its ugly head once again. So I guess let's crack on. Okay, update time. It may look that I've just lost my mind, having cut out a big hole in the wheel well and then welded in a pipe at a diagonal, but trust me, there is a plan to that reasoning. Let's take a look. So the original plan was to replicate the OEM design in here, where we had a pipe that stuck out here as part of the bodywork, and then the hoses routed up through the wheel well, and then followed this and just kept routing on the outside where it's exposed to debris and mud and water that's thrown up by the tire. And I got to thinking, why do I want to replicate that design that is just a problem child? Like, it is not a good idea. I got to thinking, well, why don't I put the hose on the inside of the trunk? So what I did was I cut out a hole here and then welded in a pipe. It's an 1.5 inch outer diameter pipe, put it in there at an angle. So I'm gonna actually route the vent lines through that, which means it's going to enter the trunk through here and kind of follow the negative battery cable along through this pass-through hole in that rear passenger seat bulkhead. Now you notice I've had to enlarge that hole there to allow extra room for all these hoses to go through. So what I'm gonna do is going to connect the pipe that I created with the pipe that goes underneath the seat to the gas tank with this flexible rubbery plastic hose. And the reason I have to create this conduit for the vent lines to pass through is because this receiving end pipe actually goes underneath the passenger seat and goes to the outside. So this is no longer inside the car. So if I didn't enclose this end of the pipe to the pipe that I just created in the trunk, then we would have outside air getting inside of the passenger compartment. So we have to put that rubber conduit over here and clamp it down over each end of these pipes so it keeps the external atmosphere separate from the internal atmosphere. Sorry, there's a lot of long-winded description, but basically that's why I had to enlarge this hole to allow for that conduit to pass through here, as well as the negative battery ground cable. And then I'll just patch up these holes and get rid of that terrible original design. That way when mud gets flicked up in here, it's just gonna be on the fender liner and can easily be cleaned away. So I think this will work. I've already started, so I hope it works. Let's just keep going at it. I think we're getting somewhere. Okay, so I think that wraps up all of the welding I have to do on this car. Let's take a look at these welds. We can see that I got rid of that hose exit that was right here, and then I repaired all the holes throughout the underside in this wheel well. And then way up there, you can see I repaired the hole up here and re-welded the bracket for that fuel evaporative canister or whatever this is. And then down here leading into the trunk, you can see that I patched up a hole down there. And then of course, my custom design there, not the prettiest looking thing. I've got to go in here and coat all these raw welds with POR 15, and then I will go back and seam seal all of the welds. After I get all those welds sealed up, then it'll be time to route our new fuel tank vent lines through the trunk. Let's get going. Starting to think I wasn't actually gonna figure this out, but I did. I was able to successfully re-engineer how the vent lines from the gas tank travel back to the expansion reservoir thing in the passenger rear wheel well. Let's take a look at it. So first of all, we'll start off in the wheel well, and you'll notice that there's no more exit point right near the rear spring perch, and it's been filled in with a patch panel. You'll see that I've also patched up a few more holes, and then we travel back to the back, and then there it is, the new exit point for the vent lines. Now, it just doesn't make sense why B&W didn't do this from the get-go. Why would you have an exposed hose system going through the most neglected areas of the car in the rear wheel arch? I mean, this is a rear wheel drive car. Can you imagine? I mean, you drive through a little bit of mud, it slings it up there, rocks get pelted up there. I mean, if you ever lose traction, you're just slinging debris up into that little fuel vent line. Gosh, it just seems like a terrible design choice. Anyway, I've fixed that. I don't know, anyone watching this, if you've got these rust hole issues, I would just recommend doing kind of what I did. Just kind of re-engineer the system, because honestly, it wasn't very well thought out. I'm sure they had a reason behind it, space-wise, probably to save a fraction of a cubic meter in the trunk area in order to route it back here, but I don't know, that doesn't matter anymore. So there's also a plastic cover that kind of comes up here and protects everything. You'll notice that it actually fits, and I didn't even plan for this, but it actually fits perfectly. If you put it in all the mounting screws, you'll see that it just kind of protects the exit point that I put in. So that was convenient. Okay, so let's go look in the trunk. From inside the trunk, you can see the metal pipe exit that I put in and seam sealed it up and painted it so it doesn't look terrible anymore. Of course, this will all be covered by an interior panel. I've also snaked the battery cable back through here. This is the standard cover for that battery cable, and I was able to retain it. I had to enlarge the hole down there so that both of these items could get through that bulkhead. Just a minimal amount of cutting, and it worked a charm. Now let's go take a look at what it looks like under the rear passenger seat. Come in here in the passenger compartment, you can see that hose that I've snaked through the bulkhead. I've already closed the fuel tank door there. I was able to connect all the hoses just as standard. I still need to put the passenger seat in and the various other components back here, but that part is pretty easy. Give it a good vacuum, but the hard part is done. So there you have it. All the rust issues are finally fixed on this car. It was a long haul. It took a lot of time. I don't even want to know the amount of hours I spent fixing all this, but I think it was worth it. I learned a lot, and it looks relatively decent. The car is definitely a lot stronger now for it. Now, there's still a lot of work to be done cosmetically on this car. I haven't finished any of the body work, meaning I haven't put body filler in and sanded it down to match the body lines. And I also still need to paint over that after I do all that sanding, but I'll probably do that later on. I'm gonna now focus on mechanical aspects of the car because ultimately that's how this whole thing started. So in the next video, we'll be looking at the rear end of the car again, what I originally was setting out to do many videos ago. The objective of that video will be to fix the emergency brake cables, and then we'll look at the differential and axles. A lot of things to do in one video, so hopefully we'll cover it all. So thanks for hanging in there, guys. This was a long, drawn-out procedure that just had to be done before anything else could be done on this car. Mechanical stuff should go by, hopefully, a lot quicker. So with that, we'll see you guys all again next time.